All right, so we are recapping our percent error lesson that we just went over. So I'm hoping that now you guys know how to find a percent error. I'm hoping that you also can define what percent error means, what the amount of error means. You should be able to understand that we're talking about a ratio and be able to identify what the part and the whole is in our percent error problems. You should also be able to calculate our percent error precisely. You should be able to use the right formula. And remember that we do include absolute values when we're talking about our amount of error. Um, and then what we talked about also is some real world context when we would need to use percent error. So, in terms of percent error, we know that it's a ratio. It should be expressed as a percentage, and it just basically tells us about our inaccuracy of an estimate when we're comparing it to the actual value. So, again, it is a part to whole comparison. And so we need to make sure that it is always in that order. In terms of our amount of error, we're talking about the difference between the estimate and the actual values. So when we talk about that difference, remember that it always has to be a positive value because we are looking at the absolute value to represent the size of the error. So how far off from zero were we? That's what we're talking about. In terms of our part to whole comparison, remember we need to understand what the part is. The part is going to be the amount of our error. So that will be our numerator. And then the whole is going to be our true value or the actual amount. And so that is going to be your denominator. So that just helps us to understand the relationship between the error and the true values. And then in terms of real world applications, we saw a few scenarios where we're able to use our percent error formulas to find out correct information and to find out how far off we were from the actual amount with our estimates. In terms of additional real world applications, we use it in the world all around us. So when we're talking about medicine, here's some reasons that we would want to make sure that we understand about percent error. The safety and accuracy of our medication dosages is going to be important. When we're cooking, we want to make sure that our recipe is going to be a success. In terms of construction or carpentry, we want to make sure that our materials fit the way that we would like for them to. If we're talking about the projections of our finances, we want to make sure that we're able to accurately compare our estimated revenues to the actual amounts. And that just helps us so that we can have better planning financially. In terms of weather, we use it for us to determine, what we need to do in case of an emergency. It helps us to plan out better. And then also emergency responses, and then also future predictions. So it helps us in lots of different ways in terms of weather. Fuel efficiency in vehicles. It helps us so that we can adjust for better efficiency. We can estimate how much fuel we need for our trips. And then finally, well, not finally, but the final note that I mentioned on here is going to be in terms of inventory management, just helping us to fine tune our stocking practices. So we can talk about it in terms of what we think we need and what we're actually using. And then we can just fine tune it in the future to make sure that we have what we need to reduce the amount of items sitting on the shelf too long or not staying stocked long enough. So hopefully you understand that percent error is not just about math. It's about being able to find and apply accurate measurements in different ways. We want to be as practical as we possibly can. So we saw a lot of different ways on how we can apply it to our day to day. And so if there's anything that you're missing, I would highly recommend. I know this was a shorter lesson. I would highly recommend going back, checking out the videos, and taking some notes so that you understand it. So those two formulas are going to be really important for us. Also, we do have that information on our reference sheet. So you will have that in terms of the percent error formula. So make sure that you're aware of that on your formula, your reference sheet for the testing.